that could become part of the record. So we just want to make that clear to everyone. So please ask your questions in the chat box. What we will do is take note of those questions and we will answer them at the end, but we don't want anyone to forget them. I know that when I'm listening to an engaging presentation, sometimes I will forget my questions. So what you can do is just place them in the chat box and we will get that done at the end. We will answer those questions at the end. And there will be specific time set aside for that, so please do not worry about that. So quickly though, before we get started, I will be asking you to, if you have not had a chance to fill out a questionnaire. Unfortunately, this is only available in Spanish and English at this time, and that is our apologies. This is a recent collaboration to have our Korean interpreters here, so we did not have time to get this satisfaction surveys in Korean, but we will be doing that in the future. So what I will be doing, I realize now I should have put that in the chat beforehand. My apologies. So what I'm going to do, if you'll give me just a second, is I will put that in the chat. And what that is, this questionnaire lets us know if we are doing a good job, and also lets us know what people are learning in the presentation. So I'm putting this in the chat now. If you have a chance to take this before the presentation gets started, that is excellent. So we have it in English and in Spanish, and in the future we will have it in Korean. If you feel comfortable taking it in English or Spanish, excellent. Otherwise, you can provide your feedback through email if that feels comfortable to you. We will do this before the presentation and after the presentation to see what everyone is learning and getting out of the presentation. All right. So why do we need a questionnaire? So we were lucky enough to get funded to support our Hispanic families in Alabama who have children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. We were able to expand that through a collaboration to also provide for our Korean speaking neighbors. But the money that came to us was through a grant. And when we apply for grants, the more evidence we can provide to say, yes, we did a good job, yes, people benefited, the better chance we have for being able to do more presentations like this and get more grant funding. So we were funded by the Alabama Council on Developmental Disabilities, and that has allowed us to provide these presentations. So the more information we have from you, the more information we have from you about what you want to see in the future, the better off we are to be able to provide that to you in the future. So introductions. I am Dr. Christine Drew. I am a special educator originally from Texas, and I am an assistant professor at Auburn University. So my research is mostly in challenging behavior and adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I was lucky enough for Dr. Doris Hill to ask me to be on this grant with her. I'm very grateful. So Dr. Hill.
Yes, hi, I'm Doris Hill. I'm an associate research professor at Auburn University and one of the primary investigators on the grant with Dr. Drew and Ms. Gutierrez.
Hello, my name is Maria Gutierrez. I am the family navigator from the Regional Autism Network on region number 4, and I am just very happy to see so many new families in this training.
All right, and our wonderful guest presenter is Ms. Lorraine Barnes, and if you would like to introduce yourself.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lorraine Barnes. I'm with Alabama Parent Education Center, APEC. I am the outreach coordinator with Alabama Parent Education Center. We provide advocacy to parents that have children with disability, and it's wonderful to be here tonight.
So with that, Ms. Barnes will get started on the presentation. I would like to do a final check. If everyone is hearing the interpreters and knows how to get to the interpreter lines. So Maria, have you assigned Ms. Du to the interpreter line already? Oh, you are, I think you said
Yes,
yes.
I have.
Wonderful. So we now have Korean interpreters and Spanish interpreters, and you should be able to hear. If you are experiencing any problems with your interpreter, please do place that in the chat box. That will be monitored. It looks like, oh, okay, it looks like one of the interpreters is having a technological issue. So if we'll, or was at one point, let me
Okay.
see how long that was right now. Okay. So Miss Du, I believe, hopefully can be interpreting. Maria, does that make sense? Good.
I'm typing right now.
Okay, so let's just take just a second and make sure we can get our interpreter back on technological help. Maria Stahonik, are you doing fine? Okay, good. Thank you for the head nod.
Ms. Du, will you let us know if you could hear us?
And I do not have Miss Du on my front page, so I cannot.
See her.
He's going to go out and rejoin.
Okay. So let's continue. Let's go ahead and I will add him again.
Okay, is Miss Du able to interpret while he is out?
I don't have access to her.
Is she also out? I'm sorry, I'll give us just a second.
I don't see Ms. Du. I don't know if
They may be experiencing
No.
some problems at the okay.
I don't see Ms. Du.
It's John.
I just, not sure what happened with,
It looks like they can hear Mr. Lee again.
okay, good.
Good.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and get started.
And then Mr. Lee, can you let me know in the chat if you can hear me, please? Because I think the problem was that he couldn't hear the presenter.
Yes, he said that he can hear somehow, but he cannot hear what the presenter is saying.
Okay.
Okay.
It looks like maybe Miss Du is trying to rejoin. Excellent.
Mhm.
Okay. She is admitted as an interpreter right now.
Okay, good. And then, all right. So as we get that sorted out, I apologize, Ms. Lorraine, for having to wait. Thank you so much for your patience. And thank you,
Not a
of course,
problem.
to our attendees for their patience. So now Ms. Barnes is going to take it away and I will be moving the slides forward. So she'll have to tell me because I don't want to go too fast.
You're good.
So we'll get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for your patience.
Again, thank you all for being here. I do appreciate your time, especially on a Friday afternoon or Friday night. Now, as I said, my name is Lorraine Barnes and I'm with Alabama Parent Education Center. And what we're going to be discussing today is what we need to know about special education. What special education means. Special education is a designed instruction. It is at no cost to parents, $0. And the purpose of special education is to meet the needs of a child with disability. Services are provided under special education. They are provided in the classroom, in the home, in hospitals, institutions, wherever the child goes to school. That's where the services is provided. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about some related services. Some children who receive special ed services also may need related services. And these services can include speech and language, occupational therapy, physical therapy, recreational therapy. These are just some services that can be provided to children that receive special ed services. Next slide, please. Related services can also include counseling, school health services, nursing services, parent counseling, or even counseling for students, parent training. If the parent needs training in the type of services that the child is receiving, that service can be provided under related services. Now, when we talk about related services, not all children who receive special ed services will need related services. This is why it is called an IEP. It is an individualized educational program. It is just as individualized as each one of us are here tonight on this Zoom call. So what I may need, you may not. What we both may need, someone else may not. So it is individualized. All students may not require related services. It is all based on the needs of the child. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about what happens when we want to receive special ed services for our children. If you as a parent feel that your child needs special ed services, there are things that you can do. If the teacher in your child's school feels that your child needs special ed services, there are things that they can do as well. For example, they ask you to evaluate your child. The request to evaluate your child is always made in writing. You as a parent can say, yes, let's do this, or you can say no to the request. That is totally up to you, your choice. Next slide, please. When we talk about referrals, the referral that is requested, it should be done in writing. The school district may say, if you request to have evaluated, you should always do it in writing. Something else. Written notice and written consent evaluated. Sometimes if you request to have your child evaluated, the school may say, let's try something else, like a different method of teaching. We all learn differently. And because we all learn differently, and that may be a dilemma for your child. So we can look at other resources or other ways to provide that instruction to your child. Your child may simply need accommodations. If we put accommodations in place, that may rectify some of the issues that your children may be having. Right now, in all of the schools, what we're doing or what they're doing is called RTI, response to intervention. And typically, if they see that a child is struggling, rather than special ed services right out the gate, they may look at RTI, response to intervention, put those tier things in place to give them assistance. Tier 2, tier 1, tier 3, whatever the tier may be, to give them intensive assistance. And if they see that those assistants are not working, then we can look at providing special ed services, wherein we look at developing an IEP, an individualized educational program, a plan for that child. Next slide, please. Now let's talk about evaluations. If we talk about referring our child for special education, you as a parent requested or if the school requested, the first thing that is going to be done is called an evaluation. I always like to say a comprehensive evaluation. Comprehensive means it encompasses everything, to look at all angles of the child to see where problems could lie. You want to see if the child has a disability and needs special ed services or related services. We do evaluations to understand your child's needs, your child's strength, and also to make educational decisions as to what is going to be in the best interest of that child to put in place a special education plan. Next slide, please. When we talk about evaluations, assessments are a part of the evaluation. And when we talk about assessments, what can assessments be? Assessments could be tests, to test the child's ability to do things and see where they may have lacks or downfall. Medical report can also be a part of an evaluation. Teacher observation, what the teacher sees in the classroom. Parent observation, very, very, very important. In order to have parent observation, to share what you as a parent see in your child as far as his or her strength or his or her weaknesses, in order to determine what plan or what is needed for that child. In that evaluation, we'll also do a review of the child's work. Child may be falling behind, may specifically be math, may specifically be reading. Whatever the issue is, we can review the child's work and see where some of those downfalls may be. Interviews with the teacher, very, very important. Interview with the parents and other resources. These are all part of assessments that will play an important role in evaluating a child for special ed services. Next slide, please. We may ask questions about evaluations such as, what type of assessments will be used? All fair questions. Are they accurate? Because we want to know, is it relevant? Is it going to get to the bottom, to the meat of the problem that my child may have? Will tests be in my child's first language? May I see the test results? I always like to liken this to, for example, ACT or an SAT. If you ask to see the evaluation, it's not something that you're going to be able to see. You can see the results of the evaluation. And the reason why I say that is because for those of us that may have taken the SAT or the ACT, or those of us that may have older children that may be embarking upon taking the SAT or the ACT, this is a standardized type testing that we cannot just print out a copy of it and see what's listed on the test. Can't do that. You could get possible questions, study guides to help you prepare for an SAT or an ACT, but you cannot see the actual document. Same thing here. When we're talking about an assessment for a child for special ed services, you will get the results of the assessment, not the actual testing material. Make sense? Now, when we're testing or assessing or evaluating a child, that test must be done in the child's first language. We have individuals that speak Spanish on this Zoom call. We have individuals that speak Korean on this Zoom call. If I'm testing your child, it has to be in that child's first language, be it Spanish or be it Korean. That child cannot be tested in English if that's not their first language, if that makes sense. So whatever the child's first language is, that is the way or in the format that the test has to be done. Next slide, please. And as we're going on to the next slide, I always say, can I see the results? Yes, you can see the results. Once the evaluation is done, you as a parent, you are entitled to get the results. And when you get the results, that result should be presented to you by the tester. Whomever is doing that evaluation, you should be able to sit down with that individual and get the data, and that should be explained to you verbatim. This is where your child tested here. This is what your child scored here. This is the cutoff, so on and so forth. That should be explained to you by the evaluator. Continuing to talk about evaluation. Evaluation results will show if your child needs special ed services. This is why all of this is done, to make that determination as to whether special ed services is needed. If the evaluation does not fit what you know about your child, because I always like to say to parents, who knows your child better than you? No one knows your child better than you. You are their first teacher. So always keep that in mind. If you feel that the evaluation doesn't fit what you know, say so in writing. Meet with your teachers. Talk about your concerns. Ask for additional testing if you feel it was not appropriate. Ask for an independent educational evaluation, which is called an IEE. You as a parent have a right to do that. If you totally disagree with what the evaluation says and you feel it should have shown something different, you have that right to dispute that and request additional testing or additional evaluation. Next slide, please. As a parent, you, the parent, the professionals, once that evaluation is completed, what they will do is have an eligibility determination meeting. And at this meeting, the test results, not the test, but the test results is presented to you as the parent and explained to you exactly what it says. If you disagree with that, I always tell parents, do it in writing. If it's not in black and white, it didn't happen. Fourth, you tell them verbally. Sometimes people have amnesia. I don't recall that conversation. But if it's in writing, you can give them a copy and always keep a copy for yourself. If you're unsure about the process or the steps that you need to take, always ask, what do I need to do if I disagree with this result? And then follow through with whatever those steps are in order to make sure that you get the services that you feel your child needs. Next slide, please. If you agree with the decision as far as the evaluation is concerned. Like I said before, the team will then have what is called an eligibility determination meeting. The team will meet, and at this meeting, you as the parent will be a part of that meeting, the school staff. The team will then review the evaluation. It is at this time that data will be presented to you. You will go through the evaluation bit by bit to explain what took place, where your child scored, where your child ranked, what your child's strengths are, what your child's weaknesses are. And from there, the team will then write what is called the IEP, the Individualized Education Program. You as a parent must be invited to this meeting, to be a part of the meeting, and to be a part of the development of your child's IEP. As I said before, who knows your child better than you? No one knows your child better than you. So it's important for you as a parent to be a part of this, to share with the educators your child's strengths and your child's weaknesses and what you want to see developed or your child improved upon or work on where it comes to your child's IEP. Next slide, please. The IEP team looks so differently. These are just some of the potential members of an IEP team. Notice parents is at the top, because parents should always be a part of their children's IEP. And then you would also have a special education teacher of the child. And the reason why I say of the child, it has to be someone that works with your child and knows your child and has an idea of what your child's strengths and weaknesses are and is able to give an input about what needs to be developed or what needs to be added to your child's IEP. Regular education teacher of the child. That is the teacher who teaches your child. I always use the example, for example, third grade teacher. She teaches third grade. She knows the third grade curriculum. That's great, but it's not the third grade teacher that my child sits in her classroom or his classroom. They may know the curriculum of third grade, but they don't know my individual child. So it's always important that when you're at a team meeting, it is always your child's teacher, not just a third grade teacher or first grade teacher or fifth grade teacher or whatever. The teacher of the child. A district personnel and a person who understands the evaluation. District personnel is just someone who is available to make decisions as far as the district is concerned. And the evaluator, a person who understands the evaluation. For example, if we have a speech therapist, we want the speech therapist there in order to be able to tell us what the evaluation says as it relates to speech therapy and my child. Others may be able to share that information, but when you have questions as it relates to speech therapy, that individual should be there to be able to give you the results of the evaluation. Your child should also be there if it is appropriate for your child. And anyone else that you as the parent deem necessary or can contribute to the development of your child's IEP, they should always be there. I always stop here and tell parents that I feel it's important for you to involve your child in his or her IEP meeting. Sometimes children are way too young to understand or be a part of the meeting, and that's totally understandable. But if it's just for the first 10 minutes, the first 30 minutes of the meeting. Allow them to come and be a part of the meeting, to know that we as the professionals or as the adults, we're making plans or decisions for you. And let them see who's in the meeting and be a part of that. As they get older, it is always important for them to be a part of their meeting. So I just think it's important to start them out at a young age to be a part of that. Every child is not going to be on board with being a part of their meeting. And I totally understand that. We don't want to stress any child out or force them to do that. I always say to parents, I feel it's important for you as a parent to talk to your child about his or her IEP. Talk to him or her about their meeting. If you know a meeting is coming up in the next 2 or 3 days, start having those just casual chats. You know, we're going to have your IEP meeting. Is there anything that you want to tell your teacher? Is there anything that you want me to tell your teacher? If they're not comfortable being a part of that, have conversation with them before, so that when you go to the meeting, you can share your child's thoughts about what is going on or what they want to share with parents, with their teachers. As a parent, you can do that. And I say that simply because there was an incident wherein a child used to go to a resource room, and they always pull the child out during story time. Story time was one of her favorite times. And she hated to leave the classroom because she was missing story time, but she had to go to resource room. So by sharing that with her parents, it was a pivotal thing for her parents to go into the meeting and share. So now we need to change the resource room time to allow this child to be able to enjoy story time, because the child was not wanting to go to the resource room to get the additional help that she needed. So in that instance, you don't want a child to miss out on something that they enjoy in school. Very, very important. And if not for that reason, I think it's important for you to talk to your children about their upcoming IEP, have them share with you what they want their teachers to know. And if at all possible, allow them to be a part of their IEP as often or as frequent as possible. Next slide, please. So in the IEP meeting, the school staff will set up the meeting, and they will send you out the invite, tell you who's going to be there in advance, tell you the time, the date, the place, the purpose of the meeting, and again, all of who will be there. When you as a parent receive this meeting notice, it is important for you to respond to it. If you see on your meeting notice that someone that you may want to be a part of the meeting, it is at this time that you should let the special ed coordinator or the case manager or whomever is responsible for sending out the meeting notice. It's important for you to then let them know, hey, I noticed that Miss So-and-so is not invited to the meeting. I need to have Miss So-and-so there because she's the physical therapist, and I have some questions or concerns about physical therapy. I noticed that Mr. So-and-so is not invited, and he is the speech therapist. I have some questions that I would like to address with Mr. So-and-so about speech therapy. So it's important for someone that you feel needs to be a part of this meeting is not listed. Please take the opportunity, contact the special ed coordinator, contact the case manager, whomever is responsible for organizing the meeting, and make sure that that person is going to be a part of the meeting in order to have your issues or questions addressed at that meeting. Next slide, please. Now, the IEP team, once we're developing or the IEP, these are some of the things that the team will discuss. What the child can do, his or her strength, their functional needs, which is just your daily routine activities of everyday living, your concerns as a parent, the concerns that the educators may have. All of these things are put in place for your child as far as their IEP is concerned. These are all things that are discussed, should be addressed at your child's IEP meeting. Next slide, please. The team will also discuss what to do when behaviors affect your child's learning. As I mentioned before, related services, every child that has an IEP may not require related services. They may require 1 or 2 related services, but not all. Behavior therapy is one that a child may need. And if that is the case, you want to discuss, particularly if the child's behavior is going to affect their ability to learn or the ability of others to learn. If so, then we have to have a behavior intervention specialist to come in and put in place some strategies to help the teachers to replace how to circumvent some negative behaviors to avoid those things from interfering with the child's ability to learn. Language, communication needs, Braille, assistive technology, these are all things that could be or would be discussed as a part of a child's IEP when the team comes together in order to develop the IEP. Next slide, please. The IEP will also describe how your child is currently doing in school. Annual goals, objectives for some children, special education and related services, and everything should be done in the least restrictive environment. These are all part of what will be developed and described in a child's IEP. Next slide, please. The IEP will also describe modifications. When we're talking about modifications, for example, if a child have difficulties completing, say I have a worksheet or assignment that consists of 150 problems, and I may need to modify that as a teacher. And this child may not be required to complete all 150, but maybe 75, or maybe even 50. We modify it for the child because of whatever disability he or she may have. Just an example. In the IEP, we'll also describe the dates and place of services, age of majority, how progress is measured, transition services. And I always like to say transition services should be in place in a child's IEP on or before their 16th birthday here in the state of Alabama. If you notice on the slide, it says transition services age 16/14 in some states. In most states, in some states, it is 14. which means on or before their 14th birthday, a transition plan should be in place. But again, here in the state of Alabama, it is on or before their 16th birthday. You should have a transition plan in place. And then I always get asked, well, what is transition? Transition is something that we all do all the time. We transition from one place to another. I transition from work to home, from home to work, whatever the case may be. In a child's IEP, a transition plan should be in place on or before their 16th birthday, and it should consist of how we're going to transition that child from high school into college, to work, from high school into a secondary education, wherever that child wants to go, whatever that child wants to do beyond high school, on or before their 16th birthday, if they have an IEP, they should have a transition plan. This plan will consist of strategies, steps as to how we're going to transition them from high school into college. Where do you want to go to college? What career field do you want to be in? I want to be in nursing. What is required for me in order to get into nursing school? What do I need to do? What are the steps that I have to take? That is what a transition plan should consist of. Now, every time I talk about transition plan, some people always ask, well, what about the kids that don't have IEP? Yes, you should have something like that too. But for a child with an IEP, it should be a written plan in their IEP. Most schools, if your child does not receive IEP services, they do have what is called, and it always slips my mind when I get to this, help me, you guys. It's called or transitioning into the
Career
work world.
assessment?
Career what?
Career assessment or career
Yes,
interest
thank
survey?
you. Exactly. Career assessment. And what they'll typically do, or a career interest evaluation, is work with the students and find out what it is that you're interested in doing beyond high school. Most of us, if you want to tell your age, you probably had something like that when you were in high school as well. Did a career assessment wherein they asked you different questions about different career fields, and how early you had to get up in the morning for certain career fields, and how long you had to be in school to be a doctor. And that quickly threw me out the ranks, because it was like, oh no, I'm done with college, I'm through. So when it comes to that, it's important for kids to have an idea of where they want to go beyond high school. Career assessments is typically done for students that do not have an IEP. But for students that have an IEP, it is called a transition plan. Same premises, but it simply has a specific plan and specific strategies as to how we're going to get them from high school into wherever it is they want to go. Definitely not on mom and daddy's couch, because we don't want our children to leave high school and come home and lay on our couch. That's when you move all the furniture out, because we want them to make sure that they're going somewhere else instead of our couch. Next slide, please. Special education is a program. It is not a place, not someplace out back that we send our children to get whatever, needs to be gotten. It is a placement. Placement is where the services is provided. First, the team will determine the IEP goals and services, as we talked about earlier. And then the team will talk about where the services will be provided. Typically, you want the services to be provided, as I said, always, it has to be provided in the least restrictive environment. Wherever your child goes to school, that is where your child will receive the services. And it should be done in an inclusive environment along with his or her peers. So again, it is not a place. It is a program. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned before, services are to be done in the least restrictive environment. Services must be provided in the most normal setting as possible. The team will consider whether your child can be placed in a regular classroom with his or her peers and still receive special ed services. It has to be as normal as possible, not a child walking around with a scarlet letter that says, I'm receiving special ed services. No, it should be in the most normal setting as possible. Team, IEP team will determine where this placement will be. You as a parent should play an important role or a very active part in where your child is receiving the services. Sometimes some children may require to receive services in a resource room for various reasons. Sometimes students may not do very well with overstimulation, too much going on. So they may need a quiet place in order to receive the service. So as a parent, it is important for you to play an active role in where your child receives this service. Next slide, please. Parents may disagree with placement decision, and that's totally on you. If you disagree with your placement decision, I always say disagree in writing. Talk about why you disagree with something. Try to find agreement. But if this does not work, you, of course, as a parent, have due process rights. And we'll talk about what your due process rights are. But I always like to say, if you feel that things are not going right or something's just not the way that it should be, talk to your teachers, talk to the professors, talk to the instructors. Let them know what is going on from your standpoint. Sometimes they may not even realize that you may have an issue. So always start out with addressing it one-on-one, talking to them to see if you can come up with some type of resolution. Next slide, please. We can skip over that one as well. And as I said, we'll talk about your due process rights. Meet with your school staff. As I said, sometimes all it takes is just conversation. They may not realize that you have issues as far as placement is concerned or as far as your child's IEP is concerned. So start out with a conversation, schedule a parent-teacher conference, talk with the special ed coordinator, talk with the case manager, call an IEP meeting, get the entire team together to discuss whatever issues that you might have. If that doesn't work, you can also have what is called a facilitated IEP. And what a facilitated IEP is the State Department has a facilitator that will come in, and that person will facilitate the IEP. The case manager or the special ed coordinator, who typically would have been the facilitator of the IEP, they would just sit back and the facilitator would take over and run the meeting and hear from both sides. Similar to mediation, you can also have a mediation session, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. You could also have a resolution session. due process hearing, and last but not least, you can file a complaint. But keep in mind, these are all your due process rights that are provided to you to help you as parents to resolve disagreements. Next slide, please. As I said before, talk one-on-one with your case manager, with the teacher. Be clear about what your concerns may be. If you have disagreement, try to seek agreement. If this does not work, then you have other steps that are provided to you. Next slide, please. And the other steps would be, as I mentioned, facilitated IEP. That does not work. You can always look at mediation. And what a mediator will do, a mediator is simply a person that is hired by the district. They should be impartial. Their only concern should be what is in the best interest of the child. They're not concerned about you as a parent. They're not concerned about you as a school. Their only concern is the child. They will come in and be the go-between the parents and the school in order to mediate and help the two of you to come to an agreement as to what is in the best interest of the child. Next slide, please. And if this doesn't work, then of course you also have another one of your due process rights, which will be a resolution session, which requires, if you as a parent, to submit a process complaint. Some parents some parents with some members, or your parents with some members of the IEP team will come together once you submit your resolution session to say, these are the concerns that I do have. The school staff has 15 days to address and come up with a resolution for your complaint. And within that 15 days, then you will come back together and come up with what the solution is to whatever problem that you may be having as far as a resolution session is concerned. Next slide, please. Due process hearing, another one of your rights. Parents and schools each present their position before a hearing officer. Now, this is more of a formal type courtroom setting, if that makes sense, because in this situation, you as a parent and the school coming together, and you have a due process hearing officer, and they're more or less the judge. When it comes to a situation such as this, we as Alabama Parent Education Center always say attorneys may represent the parents or the school during a due process hearing, because it's more of a legal setting wherein the hearing officer acts more like a judge. You as the parent will present your portion and the school will present their portion, just like in court. And then the hearing officer will then provide you with a solution or judgment, more or less, to whatever the issue may be. Next slide, please. And last but not least, a written complaint. If you as a parent feel that your child's IEP is not being addressed as it should be or as you deemed appropriate, you can always submit a written complaint that the school, of course, is not following the law, and you have to state exactly what it is that they are not doing as it relates to IDEA. State complaint forms can be found at the schools, and it also can be found on the State Department website. I always like to say, Now, because we are so technologically inclined, the schools may not have these written hard copy forms in the building. In past, they did, but you can go on the school's website in order to locate the complaint forms. And you can also go on the Alabama State Department website in order to access the complaint form. And in listing a complaint, you will have to state the specific complaint and present it to the State Department in order to have the resolution done. So these are all your due process rights. Next slide, please. And now we'll skip the poll. So as I said before, these are all your due process rights. When we get to the end, get to the end of the presentation, at the end, we have a slide that has all of our contact information as far as Alabama Parent Education Center is concerned. If in any way we can help, I encourage you as parents to contact our agency. We're parent advocates. We can help you to resolve whatever issues you may have or answer any questions that you might have as it relates to special education, as it relates to IEPs. If it's something that is beyond our realm and we can't help you with, we most certainly can connect you with someone or another agency that can provide you the assistance that we might not be able to provide you. But I just want to say thank you guys for being a part of this training tonight. Thank you for your undivided attention, and I will be more than happy to try to answer any questions that you might have as it relates to IEP or IDEA or special education.
Thank you so much, Ms. Barnes. We really appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And our last, before we get to the questions, I do want to repost the surveys. We have them only in Spanish and English right now. We are working on getting the Korean versions, but I'm just going to put these in the chat to everyone, and we'll have you do those. And then I'll also share a survey from our funding organization that will, give me just a second. Whoop. And what we'll do with that is that will let the funding organization, that is in Korean, Spanish, and in English. The first link is in Korean. And of course, I have it written unhelpfully in English, Korean. Sorry about that. I don't know how to write Korean in Korean. I'll have to work on that. But here are the links. And so there's the first link is in Korean, the second link is in Spanish, and the third link is in English. And then there are links above in English and Spanish. And these are separate surveys. One is a survey of what did you learn? And the bottom surveys are more, how do you feel? Do you feel informed? Do you feel like this is a good presentation? So both of them are important. So if you can shouldn't take you more than 3 minutes for the top one and probably about 3 minutes for the bottom one. So if we don't mind getting those filled out. And what I will do now is return us to our little, our slideshow, and we can get to the questions.
Before we go to the questions, I just wanted to say that the Survey Monkey in Korean, Spanish, and English is, that goes to ACDD, and that is a federal survey, so it gives information to the federal government. And so that is important to whether we continue to get funding. So please, if you can take the time during the question and answer session, that would be wonderful.
It also does not require you to provide any information about yourself. So you don't have to put your name. You don't have to put any specific information about yourself. If you would prefer to remain anonymous, that's totally fine. So you do not have to put your name or any of your contact information in any of those surveys. So that way, you don't feel pressure to do that. So I saw that we had some questions in the chat in Spanish, English, and Korean. So Maria, I'm not sure if you wanted to bring one of our Korean interpreters out of the interpreter line, or if one of the Korean interpreters wants to type the question for us in English so we can do that, but we could start with the English question potentially, or one of the Spanish questions and go from there. Maria, what are your thoughts?
Yes, we'll start with the Spanish questions. I'm going through in the order that we got them as the presentation started, if that's okay with everybody. So the first question that we have is, what is the relevance that it has to share the achievements from the student that he has in the house with the school, independently from the achievements that he is currently doing academically? Is there a relevance on sharing those achievements?
A relevance for sharing the achievement of the child in the home?
Yes,
Am I-
with the school.
Oh, very important, simply because sometimes I feel what's going on at home transcend into the school. Someone may say your child can't do this, that, or the other, and I'm just kind of pulling things in school. And then you can say as a parent, well, no, my child has no problems doing this at home. Make sense? So this is what we do. And these are some of the things that I do to help or to assist my child to, or encourage my child to do this, that, or the other. You know, my child does chores, you know, I don't know if they're in school, I can't get the kid to wash dishes. Why would they wash dishes in school? I'm just pulling things, right? But and you could say, yes, to wash dishes. She cooks dinner for us, or whatever the case may be. It helps for school to know what's going on in the home, because sometimes some of those same things are transcending in school. Or if they may feel at school that the child can't do something, you can say, well, yes, we do that all the time at home,
And it's
or
the
vice
same-
versa.
And
Go ahead.
the other thing to think about is culturally, there may be differences between the way things are done at a school and the way things are done at home. So that can mean any kind of cultural difference. So, you know, maybe in the home, you're using a certain kind of, I know in some cultures you have indoor shoes and outdoor shoes, right? And your outdoor shoes do not come inside. And so your child may be very good at taking their shoes off and putting their shoes on, and they're not going to necessarily have a way to show that in school, because kids don't usually take their shoes and socks off at school. So you could bring that to their attention. Same with using utensils, right? In the school cafeteria, I know in some cultures, it's children are fed directly by their parent for longer than typically white American children. And so if they're saying, oh, well, they can't feed themselves, it would be useful for you to say, oh, well, that's because that's what we do at home. So any difference is gonna, it's good to point that out to the teacher, especially if they're not understanding your child's skill level based on your culture. A lot of American teachers are white, female, and young, and particularly in Alabama, a lot of them have not necessarily traveled outside of Alabama. They may not be aware of cultural differences. And so any information you can bring to the table about your home experiences and what your child can do is incredibly valuable.
Mhm.
Sorry about that, Ms. Barnes.
No, you're fine. Absolutely. Much
Thank
better
you.
example.
The next question is, what should I do if a student needs certain assistive technology in order to communicate, but the teachers, they are not familiarized with that specific device or sign language, and the school doesn't have that related service?
The school should have that related services. It's not that the school doesn't have that related service. You know, and if they say they don't, can you put that in writing for me, please, that you don't have that and you're not going to provide that to my child, and then call our office. Please do. But no, the school should have that. And again, school home crossover. If you have a specific assistive technology with your child at home, and you know that this is beneficial to your child, you can introduce that to the school and tell them about it. You know, and this is where I get it, and this is where you can get it. I would not let them, you know, utilize mine, but this is what, you know, I'm using with my child. But please, if they say to you that we don't have that service, please put that in writing for me.
Thank you. The next question. If the evaluation that was conducted was an independent assessment and it shows different results from the original one that the school conducted, which one should proceed?
Well, you know, it's not a which one should proceed, because I'll say this, the school is not required by any means to accept an outside evaluation. They're not required. I've seen schools in different districts, they won't even entertain the thought of an outside evaluation. And then I've seen other schools that they have no problem. Bring it to us. We'll look at it. We'll incorporate that. You know, there's just such a difference there. But they're not required to accept an outside evaluation. If you disagree with their evaluation and you have another evaluation, I would request in writing that we do an additional evaluation. Request to have an independent educational evaluation. Now, the school is not under any obligations to pay for this, but you can say to them, reasonings. This is why I disagree with it, because you're saying my child can do this, this, and this. Show me the data. Prove to me that my child can do this when I know my child can't, just as an example. Or if they're saying that your child can do something and you know that your child can't, prove to me that my child can do this. Make sense? And request, show them your evaluation. You can offer them a copy of your evaluation, but by all means, request to have additional evaluation completed in order to show the discrepancy there.
Thank you. The next question. If we need a lawyer, will the cost be covered by the state?
Not in all cases, no, absolutely not. Now, if you feel that you need a lawyer for whatever reason, the state's not just gonna, you know, we'll pick up the tab and we'll pay for it. No, if they're deemed, I don't know, at the end of a suit or whatever, they may be deemed responsible and have to pay lawyer fees. But if you as a parent feel that you need to have an attorney, that's on you. And attorneys can be very, very expensive.
There is some.
This is why we at Alabama, go ahead.
There is some state support and federal support for consultation with lawyers in special education, but it's not your personal lawyer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we refer our parents to ADAP, Alabama Disability Advocacy Program. And because they are a state-run program, such as you were referring to, Dr. Drew, they will take on cases such as that and do services for parents, I'll say pro bono, or at zero cost or limited cost. There are also private attorneys that have provided pro bono services to parents. There are private attorneys that will do services for parents at a cut rate price. But these types of things can be very, very expensive. So again, I say it's not free. It's not something that the state's going to pay for. You know, you can look at an entity such as ADAP that can provide you with services as far as that's concerned. Sometimes I will say to parents, when you have issues with a school, if our agency as an advocate come in, sometimes things can rectify themselves. If you have issues with the school and you have a representative from ADAP, Alabama Disability Advocacy Program, because they do have attorneys on staff, and they come into a meeting with you, sometimes those things can rectify themselves. So this is why we try to, if we feel that parents have issues that we know need to have a legal eye looked upon it, we refer them to ADAP because they can provide those services for them.
Thank you. The next
And
question.
I just
Go
put
ahead.
the link for ADAP in the
Yes.
chat. And then I
Mhm.
realized, thank you, Senora Guzman, for letting me know that the link for SurveyMonkey was not correct. So I have put the correct SurveyMonkey links into the chat. I think the Korean and English were correct and it was just the Spanish one. So those are the correct links now. And then the ADAP link is in there as well for Alabama Legal Services.
Absolutely.
Thank you. The next question. You mentioned parent counseling. How am I supposed to apply for it? I heard that some schools, city schools, from a city school interpreter that a few years ago that there was not such a service.
It's not a service that you can apply for. Like I said, counseling may be a part of a related service that a child may qualify for. Not every child qualifies for those related services. If the child qualifies for those services, that can be a part of their IEP. So it's a qualification, not just let me apply for counseling. So no, it's not something like that. Now, if a child requires counseling, mind you, and I had this conversation with a parent earlier this week. She was under the impression that the school was going to provide therapy for her child. There's no therapy service such as that, in the school system. It is simply a school counselor, like a guidance counselor, someone that is going to counsel you as far as those types of things is concerned. So if a child require those services, that's a related services that can be provided for the child. It's not for the parents, but for the child. Make sense? And it is only based on the needs of the child. It's not something that, well, I think I need to have counseling services for my child. You can talk to the guidance counselor because they're always available to provide those services for any child within the school system, even if they don't have an IEP. That's what a guidance counselor do. If we feel that a child is having some behavioral issues or some depression issues or whatever the case may be, then they can go see the guidance counselor. But it's for the child, not for the parents, if that makes sense.
Thank you. The next question is, if my student used to wear a harness, I'm assuming this is during riding the bus, and it was written on the IEP, but now the team doesn't now want to remove it, even though he doesn't use it anymore. It has been more than a year. And so I ask myself, so where is the advance that my son has shown? So I'm assuming the student used to wear a harness during transportation, but the parent sees that he doesn't need it anymore because he hasn't used it for a year. But it looks like the IEP team does not want to remove that from the document itself.
Okay. Well, then I would say if it's in the IEP and they're not using it, they're in violation of the IEP, because what's in that IEP should be done. Make sense? And if it's in that IEP and they're not doing it, they're not adhering to the IEP. And I would have a problem with that, because a harness, I would assume, and don't know for certain here, but I would assume it was being utilized for the child's safety as far as riding the bus. And it's in the IEP, because that is a safety issue and it has to be done for the safety of that child. But if they're not doing it and haven't done it within the past year, and you as the parent feel that the child doesn't need it, then it should be able to be taken out of the child's IEP and justifiably to say, because of whatever, my child no longer needs this safety issue or whatever. But if they're not taking it out of the IEP and they're not doing it, they're within violation of that IEP. Because whatever's written in that plan, it is supposed to be followed as per the plan.
Thank you. We just got another question in Korean. Could I ask one of our Korean interpreters to translate that into English in the chat box, please? And in the meanwhile, I just want to say to all of our attendees that I really appreciate your patience. And I do want to invite you to reach out to APEC if you guys have further questions, or if you have some concerns that are pertaining to your child specifically, reach out to them or reach out to Dr. Hill, Dr. Drew, or myself, and we'll be able to assist you in the best way that we can. Okay, so I guess it was just thank you for that response. Dr. Drew, Dr. Hill, is there anything else?
I actually have a question that someone sent to me. It says, it sounds like all the related services should be written in the IEP. Is that correct?
No, no.
Well, sorry, all the needed related services, I should say.
All the needed related service, but it is all based on the needs of the child, because every child is not going to require related services. You may have a child that requires speech therapy. That's a related services. That child may not need occupational therapy or physical therapy. There's nothing there. So we don't need to put that in the IEP. It is only based on the needs of the child. Now, mind you, these are all related services. You may have a child that is receiving service under an IEP and they don't have any related services. Make sense? So it's just based on the needs of the child. Every child doesn't require related services.
And another thing,
some may require and some may not. Go ahead.
And in the IEP, it's very specific about how many minutes, how many times
Absolutely.
a week, a month, a day, who is giving the service. So it will say speech language therapist, 360 minutes per month, whatever it says. And so what's good about that is that if they are not doing that, they have to provide proof that they are giving those services at those minutes. So this is something you can ask for time logs. If it says 120 minutes and your student, you think, okay, well, my student tells me they only see the speech teacher once a month. Well, then they are not getting 120 minutes. So you can ask for time logs. There's also in related services, you have direct services and consultation services.
Absolutely.
And that's where the speech therapist is supposed to consult with the teacher. They are supposed to document that as well. So
or if it's counseling service, it could be the speech therapist consulting with the parent as well, to perhaps give the parent strategies of how to work with the child that may have specific speech issues, things that the parent can work on with the child at home. So that comes into your consultations hours as well.
And those minutes are precious because teachers are specialists in their own way, but they are not the same level of training as a speech therapist in speech or an occupational therapist in their area. So those minutes are high quality minutes. And so if your child has that written into their plan, then they need, and they, of course, they have the legal right, but also, it's worth fighting for those minutes if your child needs that, because they're valuable minutes. I'm not explaining that very well, but basically these are very specialized services, highly trained people. And so they're going to benefit your child if they need that service.
And just FYI, as you're talking about minutes and so on and so forth, I had a parent that her child was receiving speech therapy, and the speech therapist was logging hours that she had completed time with the child. But incidentally, it was the parent had, corroborating documents to say that the child was out of school and a doctor's note and so on and so forth. But the speech therapist had indicated that this speech was done at this time. So the parents was able to catch this, and whatever these amount of minutes was, she had to get back service for that. So additional time was added on to Tuesday's 30 minutes. Now it's Tuesday, 30 minutes is an additional 10 minutes for the time that she missed, or Thursday, an additional 15 minutes for the time, that she missed. So be very cognizant of those types of things as well. It's when it comes to an OT or PT or a physical or a speech therapy or whatever the case may be.
One more question that we have is, who should decide if my child needs extended school services?
Well, that again is a decision that you as a parent can be a player, a role in. And I'm not going to say who can decide, or it only relies on you or it relies on the school. I'll say, as a parent, if you can document or if you can prove that your child need extended school service because of A, B, and C, specifically stating, and they cannot dispute that, you're required to have extended school year services. My child is lax in whatever, they've fallen behind, and because of, COVID or whatever the case may be, and because of so on and so forth, they're further behind in their abilities to do this, and this. And you can show data, documentation. Last year in 2018 or in 2019, this is where we were, on this scale. And because of COVID and because of out of school and virtual learning, my child has regressed. And because of the regression, and you can show that regression, you as a parent can request extended school year services. But it's not something that you could just say, well, my kid needs extended school year services. This is what I feel he or she needs, and without any proof. You have to show the proof of that. And if you're able, and I use regression because that's truly one that, with what's going on now, if you can show data from 2020 or 2019, and you can show the regression, and extended school year services is going to close some of that gap, that's a justification. So it's not, oh, this is the person that can decide. This is the person that can decide. It's the situation or the need is what's going to be the deciding factor.
And sometimes you can use the IEP itself to prove. So I have seen where in an IEP, they'll say, student knows all of his letters and all of his numbers and all of his colors. And then the next year they'll say the student only knows half of his letters and half of his numbers and half of his colors. Well, that means between May and August, this student has regressed. Mm-hmm. So sometimes the IEP can show you those regressions. I also had another question from someone directly asking about related services. So they said, are related services provided by the school? Are there other places I can request? So this is a little complicated. From what I understand is if the school says we cannot provide for whatever reason, then they have to pay and provide that service from an outside provider. But
Not related services in the IEP. You know,
Right.
you can get physical therapy or occupational therapy. That's an outside entity that the parents may pay for that. That's not considered related services in the IEP because it's not written in the IEP. So
Right.
that's completely separate. But if the child needs that service and the school is saying that they can't provide that service, and you can show the need, I go back to that. You have to show the need. It cannot just be, well, I think, or I want, I feel, no, or I desire. The need has to be shown that the child needs this service. And if they're saying they can't provide it, again, put it in writing and give me a copy of that, please. So related services is what's provided by the school. I've worked with several parents that have children that they receive outside OT or outside physical therapy or outside speech therapy, and that's by parental choice because they want to make sure that their children receive everything that they can in the best interest of that child, and that's a parental choice. But for a school to say we can't or we don't, no. And anything outside of the school is not related services. That's, you know, it may be services that's related to related services under an IEP, but it's not related services in the IEP when they're going to Dr. A or Dr. B in Auburn or Birmingham or wherever to receive that service.
Thank you. We have another question in relationship to related services like OT, PT, and speech. The question is if these services are required only in certain states or on every state of the United States.
I'm hoping I'm understanding this. Related services is not a statewide situation. It is under IDEA, Individual with Disability Education Act. Those are all a part of related services. That's all over under IDEA. Make sense? Individual with Disability Education Act. So wherever you go, I leave here, go to South Carolina. My child is receiving physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, whatever it is, and they go to South Carolina. That's also a related services that they can receive there. I'm receiving these related services. That's also services that they could receive there. So it's not statewide or certain states or whatever. It's an IDEA mandated type service, if that makes sense, under Individual with Disability Education Act. But again, I cannot stress enough, it is only provided to students based on the needs of the child. Every child may not receive related services. It is only based on that child's needs.
Thank you. I think that those are all our questions that we have.
Okay.
You know, unless any anybody else have any other questions that would like to put it on the chat box right now.
I just wanted to say this is the first time we've had translation in 2 languages. So we are very excited to provide this. And if you have feedback for us, please give us an email so we can do this even better next time. Because this was the first time we've done this with 2 in translation or interpretation services. And our next one will be in April from the Alabama Disability. I know we've talked about the Alabama Disabilities Advocacy Program quite